Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is my Coleman CT200U. Today, we're going to knock it out so we can rock it out. I want to get this engine done, that way I can get it back on the mini bike and ride, man. We're going to be using this Autolite AR3910X spark plug that came with the CT200 Add More Power Kit. That's what it looks like. I have a traditional spark plug here. This one, the factory washer's gone. It had to do with when I was indexing the spark plug. We're not going to be indexing this one, so that is kind of like the big benefit here. You see where the electrode is on your traditional spark plug? Alright, it's in the middle, but the spark, you know, could be a little off center because it's going to arc. This, instead of the one post, has 4 posts, and then your electrode in the middle. So theoretically it's going to have a more centered spark. You add more cyborg meat in a few places, so when you put the spark plug in the chamber, you're eating up a little bit more. I'm not going to say that the spark plug boosts compression, but it does take up some of that little bit of unused space. As you can see, I've had good luck with my plugs. This one is actually cut. I guess that wasn't the best example. Usually that post piece would be like out right there where my fingertip is. Okay, so yeah, the arc on this thing would be way off center. When you index a spark plug, what you're trying to do is get this part right where the spark is, not this part or the side. You're trying to get that centered on your chamber so that when the spark plug is all the way in, that is facing down towards the middle of the chamber. Your intake, your feed goes in, it's going to catch the spark and explode. If the spark is off to the side, it could be argued that there is time wasted between the feed going in and the actual explosion happening. Okay? It would be minute. Everything's so small, and you know, but you got to go for everything you can when you can, and we're going to seize that opportunity right now. This spark plug, and we're going to get rid of the resistor. This resistor is in the way of the coil, all right? This thing on your flywheel, this magnet spins around. It goes past the coil. It gives the coil a signal every time the magnet goes by. Let's say it's a positive signal. It does all that, right? The coil then converts that signal to some sort of electrical current that has to go to your spark plug. You still following me here? This is good stuff. This resistor, right? I mean, literally, resistor. Okay, this thing is les resistance. It is giving less to your spark plug than the coil is sending. All right, it's eating that up. So we're going to take the middleman out of it. That way, the coil gets the signal and it sends the hottest charge it can directly to the spark plug. There's nothing special about the coil itself other than that it's not RPM limited. The Ghost has one that is 6,000. Wildcat has one, I believe is around 6,000 too, maybe 5,000. Anyways, this is not. This is your standard GX200 clone 196 job. It came right off of this engine. We look down inside. Alright, that's where the wire goes. Looks like a screw. Over here in the cap, it's the same thing. I removed the stock wire and grabbed on with a pair of pliers and I unscrewed it. You twist to the left and you pull out gently. Sometimes the coil end can be difficult. The end with the boot always seems to be easier, no matter what. We're going to be replacing the boot with a non-resistor style. We're also going to be upgrading the wire. This Axel super stock, high temp super stock radio suppression core 8mm. All right, good stuff. One end is going to get threaded onto that little screw portion. All right, so I'll feed it in there and I'll screw it in so that much of the wire's in there. That screw will grab whatever core they used. I'm reusing the little rubber sleeves that came with the stock coil and wire. This was the end from the boot, and this was the end that was over this section of the coil. I have to put a little water or spit or something on the end and give it a twist, but it'll go through. We're using a little bit thicker wire, so I have these little star things, alright, asterisks, they're marks. Those might not be there. Maybe you'll have some letters. Maybe you'll have to grab a marker and make a mark of your own. Regardless, what you're trying to do is gauge the depth. That way, when you twist this thing in, you know you're getting somewhere. According to my first mark, or what's left of it after I gave it the old thunder twist, then I'd say I'm in there about 3/4 of an inch or so, so we're good and deep. That wire is now contacting all of that screw. Whether or not that's the electrode end, whatever, I don't know. It's a terminal. Ah, there it is, okay? We're plugged into the coil now. I'll slide my little sleeve down over this, and then we will work the other end. Don't worry, it's definitely not going to be that long. That would be weird. Now we're going to turn the flywheel to get the magnet good and away from where this coil mounts. We don't need that working against us right now. Perfect. I'll grab the 2 bolts and temporarily mount the coil. We are temporarily mounted. Now we got to figure out a length for this high temp super stock radio suppression core 8mm wire. I'm going to get the spark plug right inside the hole, tightened and everything. The spark plug is in, and now we're going to replace the resistor boot with a non-resistor boot. I'm going to use this MSD one today. It just goes straight through. It's a little dark in there, but the wire and this terminal will go in this end, and the other end will go on the spark plug. It'll be a direct connection. The only thing in between is the wire. Make a nice sweeping arc. We don't want it too short. You want to be able to pull everything off later on when you're working on things. So get our boot back on there, and I'm looking at the lettering again for a reference point. Looks like the stars are in our favor. I'm going to go about 3/4 inches past, and I'm going to cut this. We still have to get the wire strippers on there and get some of this material off. That way we can expose the core, so we'll lose a bit of length. Keep that in mind. I used a 10 gauge stripper to expose about 1 inch of the core on the end of our wire. On the absolute inside, see if I can get you in focus, there's like a little sleeve that's over the final actual core. I got that off with my fingernail. This now gets bent over, something like that, and the terminal will go over it, and then it'll get crimped down. I'll try to somewhat preset it without crimping it so you can see what it looks like. This wire might be a little bit big for this terminal, but we can make it work. Anyways, I have the core bent over, alright, and you can see how it runs underneath the back side of the terminal. When I crimp that on, we're going to have very positive placement. I'll pull it nice and tight before I give it any love. I don't have the crimping tool for these XL wires, so I'm just going to rely on my strippers and a pair of pliers. It's tight, but I'll tell you, I really got to get the tool for this so I can do it absolutely perfect. Like I said, I think this wire's a little bit big for the terminal anyway. When you have everything the right size, then those 2 sets of teeth should pretty much come together as a seam when they crush down on the wire. But what's happening is, as it crushes down, the wire material itself has no place to go, so it just starts to deform and get worse and worse. I'm going to stop there where I know it's still good. It's super tight. I mean, It's not going to just vibrate off. It's also going to have a good amount of silicone working in its favor. In some instances, you can send the wire through the boot and then put your terminal on and then pull it back through the other way so that your terminal ends up where it needs to be. Well, this isn't one of those instances. I'm going to be cramming that directly in this end so that the terminal ends up somewhere in that hole on the other end, facing obviously down towards the spark plug and not up towards the cap itself. Man, that stuff gets everywhere. That's from the wire that I cut off. It's like fiber optics or something. Alright, I'm all the way in. It's a very snug fit. A little bit of spit on the end of the boot goes a long way. When you're working it, you want to grab firm on the boot right about there, and then you want to be right around here with your other fingers, okay, pushing towards the boot and cramming the wire in. If you come out too far, you'll be flimsy. You want to keep it solid. That way you can maximize your penetration. Let me turn the light on, and voila, there it is, ready to receive the spark plug. Now we're going to mount the coil and set the gap. When we're setting the gap on an ARC flywheel, we use 2 paper business cards. Not a paper business card and your leftover Longhorn gift card or anything like that. It's got to be 2 of the paper jobs, alright? Nice and snug. And that will work every time. On your PVLs and your stock flywheels, you run 1 business card. Again, make sure it's a paper one. Now, just hook the spark plug up to the other end, wait for the click, and that job is done. I may have spoke too soon, because something that might not work every time is the throttle linkage that you wanted to use, because the spark plug wire might be in the way. There's only one way to find out. Might as well install the carburetor, get the linkage on there. Oh boy. Stock linkage. Those are the stock carb, right? Sort of. We had a Tillerton PK3A on there before. This is a non-EPA adjustable stock carburetor. This is a Tillerton PK carburetor. However, this is a PK660, so it's only a stock appearing carburetor. This one is CNC bored out in the Venturi, so she's a little big in the gullet. Flip this one over, open it up. Alright. See how much you have in the middle there? It's really hard to get them side by side, but yeah, it's enough that you notice even there. This thing's got some wall up to it. They come stock with a 37 main. We're running a 37 in the PK3A. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm not going to go to a 38 yet. I want to see how it's going to do on our little 196 here. I'm going to get the rest of this on with a stage 1 billet adapter, and then we'll take a look at the linkage sitch. It's going to be a tight one. Nah, we good. We're barely touching on the spark plug wire. And even with just that little return spring, we got ourselves a smooth snapper. This is a Tillotson 212R linkage. You can make one of these out of a stock linkage. You just have to drill a hole in the arm and then bend up one of those throttle rods. I had to add a couple washers underneath. That way I could clear my Mondo head stud and nut there. I really like the way this looks. It's nice and clean, simple by design. The rod and the butterfly are somewhat protected under there. Our fuel line is probably going to be coming from this direction. We're not going to know until it's on the mini bike. Next, we're going to spin things around and we're going to take a look at the vent system. Having the right valve cover can turn this into a walk in the park as well. This GX200 billet version from my friends at OMBWarehouse.com has plenty of room to clear our Champion rockers, and it also has 2 pre-threaded holes to receive your fittings or barbs. I'm going to lube up my rockers. That'll do. I get a fresh gasket on there, and then I'll bolt this beautiful son of a gun up. All cleaned out and tight. Now we just have to connect this line to the barb on the ARC side cover. This is going to allow the block to relieve some pressure up over the valves. Any oil that comes with it should fall down over the valves and make their way through our ported galley hole and back down into the honey pot. The pressure still needs somewhere to go, and once we get this engine on the mini bike, we'll have a better idea of which system to go with. It's all going to get into height and whether or not we have anywhere to mount a catch can. I'm starting to put my sheet metal back on, and this little dimple just reminded me that this was giving me some guff when I was installing the torque converter cover. there's a little 8mm bolt that goes through the top of it, and it has a hole in the plastic that has to line up with the threaded hole on the plate. When you push the plastic in, it was bottoming out against this piece of sheet metal. So I'm going to cut about a 1/4 inch off of it. There's the line that I marked, and then at the end I'll round the edges just like they did from the factory so that they're not sharp. Beautiful. I just added a lock washer to each one of these bolts. They're not tight yet, it's just threaded in. That makes lining up this hole a lot easier since you have to go through the fan shroud too. Before the fan shroud goes on, make sure that you run the wire for your kill switch. Yeah, buddy, that is a good looking engine. I'm really digging all the chrome and aluminum accents with that gloss black and yellow. We have one last thing we can do before I have to put it on the mini bike. The starter we're leaving off for the driver. The filter, I might try to do something with like an intake. The exhaust is up in the air, and you'll see why when we put it on the mini bike. And the gas tank is going to be satellite. Oh, and we got to figure that out too. The vent system, whether or not we can fit a catch can somewhere on the frame, or we just run a PCV line with a filter on the end. Might as well put oil in it, and then I'll put it back on the frame. I used an old quart and a funnel to measure out just under 18 ounces of 10W30. Then I tossed a cap full of a zinc additive in there. You can see we're right at that happy point. Make sure my filler's clean, and I'll get this thing sealed up. 4 bolts later, and our engine is installed on the riser in its brand new home. What do you think about that? It's actually not even a brand new home. This is the same exact Coleman CT200U. It's just been slightly modified. It has a full fender and tab shave, front and back. We don't have any of the old tabs or anything that were there for the guards. I took off the one that was over here for the jack shaft. Yeah, I think that's all I took off of the frame. What I added to it was some 1/8 inch thick diagonal banding and some 16 gauge gusset work for the down tubes and the neck. When we get this thing outside, we get a better look at it. For now, let's keep going with this engine installation. These bands in the back are the ones that might be in the way of our header. So I'll pull a couple out and see which one will get the job done. Okay, first off, the air intake idea is not going to cut it. I thought this would help by moving the air filter to a different location, but no matter how you try to position it, all right, that's all the way back. If I go forward, you see what happens? How far my leg is from the foot peg and the side of the mini bike. Try to go to the back. All right, if you have your foot on, you come off, and I'm right on that thing. Plus, you can't have the air filter this close to the frame, so it would actually have to be right out there. And yeah, so X-nay on the intake say, and we'll just use our filter naturel. We'll keep it angled to the back. That's awesome. Okay. You don't really want to fly off the back of this anyway. It's got a rack that'll catch you. Now for the headers. We have the right side header that we had installed on this mini bike before. If I try to get that on there, it doesn't go. It's hitting the inside of the 1/8 inch banding on the other side of the frame. This banding is structural. There are seams in the tubes on the frames, all right, and they conveniently place them near the corners. Well, this adds rigidity and ties that all together so it can't come apart. Hopefully it helps it from folding too. Not that that's even a problem on these mini bikes, but I tend to go after what I see. So we're not modifying the banding. That's staying. This exhaust is not. The next one we'll try is another right side exit. This one shoots straight across right up over the valve cover. If we try to get that on there, voila, it fits. We'll have to change this fitting to something that has an angle on it. That's not ideal for this particular fitting because that would be going to our PCV or a catch can. You would really want it kind of running vertical. The other thing that it sort of interferes with is the location of the air filter. Remember, we don't want to bend that thing forward and come up into our leg real estate. Yep, that one's got to go too. Our last choice is my favorite. Alright, Old Dependable. This is just a side exit. Left. Straight shoot back off the manifold. You put it on. Alright. It goes towards the frame, but not directly at it. I'd say less than half. So, a little bit of heat tape on the banding and tubing will fix that. We're going with that one. Righteous. I just tightened the air filter up and check this out. The fan shroud actually helped the swoop that we had on our spark plug wire. It's not even touching anymore. Positive vibes, man. I already scratched the handlebars up a little when I was working the kill switch on, but that is 100% okay. This is right where the throttle is going to go. We're actually going to sand some of this paint off the surface so that it doesn't cause the tube to stick. I'm going to be using the stock Coleman throttle housing. So I just removed the grip so that we can repurpose the tube as well. I got some new ones, don't worry. I didn't sand any of my new safety red paint off that I didn't have to. I did a coat, I sanded the whole bike, and then I did a coat of white primer and then 2 coats of the red. This is going to be able to twist no problem. When we put it on, we just want to make sure that, you know, we're overhanging a little bit. That way when we have the rubber grip on there, it doesn't catch on the metal and bind up. That'll be sweet. Well, that looks awfully familiar now, doesn't it? Fits good too. That's because that is the stock throttle cable for this mini bike. There's the linkage. I even used the factory return spring system. We got off and on and everything in between. We don't have the governor trying to manipulate the situation. It's a little bit stiff when you come all the way back. If it's an issue, I might try to see if I can find a milder spring, one that doesn't have quite so much tension on it. Another possibility, maybe we can snip a few coils off and that'll release some of the preload so that it's not already under maximum compression. You know what I mean? It's like 50% there when we're starting. I think those coils can spread out a little more. We'll see what happens. We have the intake, we have the exhaust, throttle cable. Let's run the brake line, and then we'll get those new grips on. As strange as it might seem, the key to installing these high quality grips is just WD-40. Spray it down inside and then get to doing your thing. It'll make it easier to get them on, but it won't be easy to get them off. Once it dries, you're good to go. My new grips are on and my controls are set. We still have to get the chain on and set tension to figure out where the axle is going to be, but once I do, I can make my adjustment. As far as the throttle, that return spring isn't going to be a problem at all. These things are a game changer. I just gave my torque converter plate a quick service. I broke it down, I inspected and greased both of the bearings, and then I swapped out the 10-tooth sprocket for a 9 and the red spring pulley for a yellow. That is my preferred combination for a modified engine. The plate is mounted up with the pulley, and up on the workbench I have my genuine Comet 30 series driver out. I just swapped in the aluminum weights with the pink springs for an engagement of 2800 RPM. I have all of my spacers, washers, shims to get my alignment straight between the driver and the pulley. There's my bolt. We're going to get plenty of threads. I have a couple washers and a lock washer. I'm also using one of the keyed pilots that come on a generic 30 series. I have the higher quality replacement belt for this unit. However, I am cheap and I'm going to get my money's worth out of this one before I swap it out. Now, I'm going to get my torque wrench on this bolt. I already have my ratchet set up on the other side, and I'm going to set it at 20 foot-pounds. I got my starter back on. The chain is installed. The tension is set. And I also adjusted the brake. Now I got to get the torque converter cover on, and we have to do something about the rest of that vent system. You can go ahead and check that cover off the list. I also started installing my vent line. I'm running a braided hose uphill off of my barb. I'm going to put a PCV valve up here. It's just an inline job with a filter on the end. This will let air out but not back in. Any oil mist that comes up with the pressure should fall back down as long as we remain somewhat vertical here. This would be a good time to get that gas tank done. Let me see what I can come up with for that. You ready for this? We're going to start with a piece of foam right on top of the rack. After that, we add this wooden crate that I made. Oh yeah, she's all custom. We got another piece of foam. That one goes down inside. Make sure all the holes line up. And now we need the gas tank itself. Allow me to introduce to you the 5.5 liter, aka 1.45 gallon plastic gas tank off of the Zorn. This thing is sweet. It's nothing extra, but they give you everything you need. It comes with a petcock. You do have to drill the hole and set it, but I already filled it with gas to make sure it doesn't leak, and well, it sat overnight and it did not leak. So we're gonna run it. It has this nice orange vented cap. The plastic isn't too bad. I've seen this stuff used on some various garden implementation. So I have high hopes. This fits right on top of that box. You see that nice hole I put in there with no sharp edges? That's where a fuel line goes out. Now we just need something to hold it down. The tank and our crate. These are the biggest and strongest zip ties I could find at the hardware store. These things are no joke. I'm going to be using 4 of them to attach the tank and the crate. Two of these are going to get sleeved with 1/2 inch inside diameter heater hose. Those ones are going to go over the tank itself. The other 2 are going to go on bareback, and they'll hold the crate from moving side to side. Here's my tank straps from above. Nice and neat. We have good downward pressure, but at the same time, we're not crushing our plastic tank. These 2 zip ties go around the strongest part of the crate and then the rack on the side. These 2 are connected to the rack as well. Look at that. Alright, this is rugged. I still have to cut the tails off, but I can assure you that this thing isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Now I just have to get it to the carburetor and finish off my PCV here. I'm thinking I could just drill a couple holes in this, run my line up, my filter, kind of like a short antenna up in the air, and then zip tie it right to this box. Absolutely. We're nice and vertical. We're running downhill back to the valve cover. The fuel line, I just ran it out, hit a filter, added a shut-off switch. Even though we have one on the carburetor, this will make servicing easier in the future. Then a little piece of tie gun on the end, just so we can check the flow. It's in there. Yeah, buddy. I think we're ready to start her up. I got you propped up on the cooler. It's the best seat in the house. Ooh, this feels nice and balanced. Let's see, let's turn the fuel on. Choke is on. Turn the other fuel valve on. power. Give it a little bit of gas. Let's try it without the choke. That might be the jetting. I'm 1.5 turns out at 37 still. Not a terrible idle. That heat tape on there. Can't really see if it's sitting up the frame. I'm putting my hip up against the brake lever. Turn the gas a little bit here. Got a little clip of smoke. Have to run it with the 37 and see what happens. We have to go up, I guess, the next jet. So I'll let this thing idle, shut it off, I'll turn it back on. I'll do that a few times, and then I'm going to want to get a load on there so that I can break this engine in. It's smooth. Just added a few stickers. Other than that, everything's the same. Fuel on. That one's on. Choke's on. Flip the switch. I don't know how that rack's gonna work out. You add performance to these things and they like to do wheelies and stuff. That time I used the choke and just a little throttle to start it. The engine's still breaking in, so I'm not going to romp on it too hard. We do have the aluminum weights and those pink springs, so the engagement's high. It'll get some RPM, but try not to redline it, you know what I mean? The only thing really in the way of installing the stock tank on this mini bike is the barb for the vent that's on the ARC valve cover. It comes up too high and the tank bottoms out on it. So the easy fix would be to go with a 90-degree. Alright, that'll get you down in there, and then it'll tuck to the side and under the tank, right? No. All those threads don't go into the side cover, and it doesn't go low enough. It also bottoms out on the tank. My solution to that, I took the mini disc on a Dremel and I cut off about a 1/4 inch of threads. I then rethreaded it with the correct die. I get my wrench. I now have, hopefully, my new barb. Let's see how this goes. I'm threaded in as far as I can go. I really hope this gamble pays off, because I can't get the tank mounted on the engine while it's still on the frame. I could probably loosen just these bolts, or it might be easier to just do the 4 on the bottom. I'd probably lean the whole thing sideways with the chain still attached and get that on. It's gonna be close. The hole in the back is right there. That hole is right there. It's still, we're still up in the front though. It's gonna be back further. I'm gonna go for it. Getting rid of that makes it totally worth it either way, so looks like I'm gonna have a new tank to work on my engines. Sweet. I did the 4 bolts on the bottom and took the chain off, leaned it out the other side, scratched the frame up a little bit. No big deal, I can touch that up. The headache though is right here. Again, it's still not going down far enough so that I can get that bolt to line up. Oh, that is super aggravating. It's right up there with that thing. I even tried moving it to the back hole. Still, no ground recovered. Well, I have a guarantee on this, and that is going to be to remove the block to valve cover vent altogether. I have another one of these plugs. I'll get it in that threaded hole that this barb is in now, so that we got a double there, and I'll go ahead and throw a fuel line on this thing and send it out the other side. My main concern is blowing out the side cover gaskets. 18-pound springs, a CS cam. We're probably not going to get there. I'm running a high compression head, so I had good intentions. I swear. I really don't think we're going to blow this out, and we could actually tighten this up, because we're just going to run a real free flowing vent out of the valve cover by itself. So it might change that whole unit right out. When you're running the stock gas tank, the fuel line has a tendency to travel alongside the cylinder. I just went with this heavy duty style fuel line. It's 3/16, but it should be a little more resilient to heat than the stock stuff. Yeah, as you can see, I now have an OMB Warehouse governorless linkage on there, and that kind of has to do with this heavy duty fuel line. It's a little stiff and awkward. It gets tight trying to bring the carburetor in and get the line down onto the inlet. So, is what it is. I lost the 212R linkage and went with that instead. I like it a whole lot better. I'm running a spring on it that is very light, so my throttle is even snappier than it was before. This worked out okay. Nice and short, compact. Oh, I jetted the carb. I went from that 37 up to a 38. Out back, I cut all ties and I removed that horrible gas tank. I also took it a step further and removed the entire rack. We don't need that anymore. The rack required a longer axle. I just found one that was close to fitting. It was a little bit long and ran out of thread, so I had to get creative with my spacing. There's a few washers over here. There's actually a couple that I added. Alright, that's eaten up about a 1/4 inch of the frame flex that was in this rear end. The tire and wheel is not centered from the factory. Without the fender and the rack there, you can really see it, but it's a mini bike and it's not going to hinder the performance that much, so we're just going to leave it like that. It makes it easy, you know what I'm saying? I don't have that rack to contend with anymore. If we tried to space this thing out to make it in the center, alright, we would have to work off of this side. Look between those two frames. You're talking like 3/4 of an inch or so that we'd have to make up. Alright, we're already at alignment on the sprocket, right? So when you add to this side and you move it over, guess what else moves? The sprocket. How are you going to space the sprocket back in the other direction for the distance that you make up over here? Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. We're just going to leave it just like that. It's perfect. A little bit of pipe insulation and a few zip ties really tightened up my vent line situation. I have it hanging out off to the side of the rear wheel and away from the seat. I guess I could go out and around and up front too, but we got a lot going on there already. Let me step back and look at this thing. Yeah, buddy. Now that is more my style. I can't wait to get out and ride this now. We don't have the rack on the rear, so if it does wheelie or we end up in a situation where I have to eject from the mini bike, my escape route is wide open back there. I also don't have my butt right up against that box. That wasn't so comfortable. Just knowing that it's there. This is gonna be sweet. Turn the fuel on, hit the choke, kill switch. I'm going to give it a little bit of throttle when I pull it. Turn the choke right off. It's a lot better already with that 38. Trying to aim you guys down a little bit so you can see some handlebar action. The throttle is super light. I might actually have to add some tension. back is a world of difference too. I don't have any fenders on here. This could get messy. Oh, I know it is. I don't have my boots on either. I'll try to creep. Doing it. You can imagine what my back looks like right now. It's still fun. This is just to see if you can still ride slow. It's a mild build like this. It lets you do things like that. Kick it out. Dedicated to it, right? Oh, it's so bad. Hey! That's what it's made for, right? Whoop! I hit the kill switch. I think I got a little bit of mud in my throttle linkage. Whoops. I'm gonna have to hose it down. I didn't even make it to the hose yet. Might have mud in them. Flintstones. Alright, I got things sort of cleaned off so we can do a bit of a post-ride inspection. The torque converter looks dirty, but everything seems intact. The pulley looks alright. Our belt is okay. Everything feels tight. The chain is loose. The engine could have slid back, or the axle could have come forward. How? With those adjusters on both sides? I'm not sure, but I mean, that would explain the brakes too. Because if I roll it and pull it, they will lock up, so they're there, but I really have to squeeze. The adjuster is turned in pretty well. So what I think happened is if the wheel slid forward, it could have brought the cable with it, and then that would make it slack over here on the chain as well as the cable. I'm going to loosen up the axle, put some tension on the chain, and see if this doesn't improve at the same time. Check it out. It took me about 2 minutes and 3 wrenches. 10 millimeter for the adjuster and a 19 and 17 for the axle. I have tension on the chain again, and we have all of our brakes. I might actually have to ease that up a little bit. Underneath the mini bike, I used a 1/2-inch ratchet to tighten the 4 bolts that hold the riser onto the frame. I then used a 14 millimeter socket to back my brake adjuster off a couple threads. Other than cleaning and re-oiling these filters, I should be ready to rip. My next plan of attack is to modify the seat and mount a gas tank above the frame. Oh boy. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.
I want you to stay.